Paulla Hunter, welcome to the Rocky Mountain Writer.
Thank you so much for having me. This is
You
my first
bet.
official podcast ever.
Woohoo! Well, it's pretty painless. If you can talk on a phone or talk to a computer and pretend you're talking on a phone, it's pretty much the same thing. So
Okay, I can do that.
yeah, I'm sure you can. So we're catching you in Cheyenne, where you live.
Correct. Mhm.
Are you right in downtown Cheyenne?
Yeah, pretty close. The capital of the state is maybe 3 blocks down.
Okay, well, that's downtown as far as I'm
Yeah, that's
concerned. Yeah.
yeah, pretty close.
How long have you lived there?
We've lived in this house for over 40 years. My daughter was
Wow.
a toddler at the time. Yeah, I
Wow.
have to pinch myself when I think about it. And you
Yeah.
go into doctor appointments and they say anything changed, and I go, no, I'm boring. Nothing changes. Same address.
Yeah. And what brought you to Cheyenne?
Well, when I was in 3rd grade, my dad got transferred by Ma Bell at the time up here to run the engineering things all over the state. He was an electrical engineer. So when he moved, we all packed up and moved. So
Gotcha.
I've been here since 3rd grade.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's the best thing about living in Cheyenne, and what's the most challenging?
The best thing and the most challenging is Cheyenne Frontier Days. It's the best thing because when I married Raj, he was already involved in it. And basically all I did was dress up and show up. And then later he became one of the chairmen. There were 12 chairmen that served for 3 years, and he was in charge of the rodeo. Now I say it's one of the worst things because people go, oh, God, I got to go to a doctor's appointment and the damn parade's going on. And, I hate these tourists all coming in and eating food at my favorite restaurant. I mean, that people do have a mixed bag of feelings about it, but I like it. I live on Cary. And so when they bring all those historic carriages down with those beautiful horses, just Stacy, when she was little, just sat there and ate her Cheerios and she thought that was the parade. And then my mom said, I'm going to take her down. And I said, knock yourself out. She came back and she said, you never told me there were bands. Well, wasn't important to me. So, okay. So now her daughters are watching from the same concrete step, except they're a little bit more entrepreneurial. They have a lemonade stand. It's kind of interesting.
Wow. That is a big operation. I'm sure.
It really is. It's got like over 2,000 volunteers, and it's all run by all volunteers. We have like a CEO and some secretarial and some other support staff, but basically the entire thing is run by volunteers.
No.
It's pretty fun.
And if I'm not mistaken, there's some overlap with your first novel.
There is. I didn't call mine Frontier Days for obvious reasons. I was told that I could, but as soon as that person dies that told you could, you're in deep doo-doo. So I just changed it to Cheyenne Rodeo Days.
Yeah. Well, before we get to the book, and we will very shortly, your first novel just came out a few months ago.
Yeah, that's this.
Yeah. It just came out though, what, fall?
May 10th.
Oh, last spring. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, great. And we want to talk about what your character and a little bit about the plot and stuff like that. But how long have you been writing?
I never really seriously wrote until college, and I got into a beginning writing course as one of my English majors, and I really liked the teacher, and so I was going to take his intermediate, and he said, you can't take that. He says, you've got to over be average. In English, you have to take advanced writing. I went, seriously? I can't just sit here and be intermediate? Can I do that? Nope, can't do it. So push comes to shove, and I go to the first class, and it's a seminar with all men and me. And
where was it?
At University of Wyoming.
Okay.
So yeah, in the A&S building, and I looked at Dr. Rotifer. Oh, not Rotifer. I can't remember his name. And I caught him after class, and I said, "There's no way that whatever I write isn't going to seem very feminine to everybody, and so I won't have the same anonymity that everybody else gets." And he agreed. So he read my stuff separately, and then when we went through the through everybody's writing, they would always say he or she. They were really trying to include me, and I would give notes to, but that was my first real exciting kind of writing for someone. And I accidentally published in the literary magazine. I had a few vignettes that I'd written just for fun, and I made the mistake of giving it to a friend who, unbeknownst to me, was editor of the literary magazine on campus. And all of a sudden, I opened it up and went, "Holy Magnolia, that's mine." So I tracked him down. I said, "Owen, what are you thinking?" He said, "Well, I have pages to fill up." I said, "You should have asked me." He said, "You'd have said no." Yeah, I would have. But I basically started writing seriously in college. And then after college, I went into teaching, which is what I wanted to do. And so I taught English, speech, and drama. My first,
where?
That's a lot. My first school was in Green River, Wyoming. And I was in charge of all that, the
Wow.
plays and the speech meets. And I had, 5 different English preps. And I look back now and think, oh God, I'm surprised it didn't kill me. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
So I stayed there for 3 years, and then we started having and a lot of major problems like rapes and people exposing themselves. And I said, if I can go down to Denver and at least they have theater and museums, I don't have to, I don't have to put up with this up here. So I moved back down to Denver and stayed with a friend. We shared an apartment, and then I tried to get on the school district down there, which was challenging. Most of the secretaries knew me by name. And then finally I got an interview at Westminster. So I taught 1 year at Westminster, which was really fun. And then got engaged to my husband and came back to Cheyenne. Now I taught for 1 year at the Catholic school I graduated from. And I said, you don't truly need a drama teacher here. You need a reading teacher. These kids can't read.
Wow.
And I must have said it 15 times. I talked myself out of a job, but it was. Then I went to work for the school district, and I stayed at East High School for the rest of my career.
East High School in Cheyenne.
In Cheyenne, yes.
Yeah.
When I was in Denver, I subbed at East High School in Denver, though, which was really fun.
My wife taught at East High School for a little while, and in the art department a little while.
Oh, good for her.
That's great. Yeah. Art. Yep, that's awesome. We moved out of Denver a few years ago, but yeah. And
I loved the school. I really did.
So how long did you teach at East High School in Cheyenne, just to sort of keep track of your career?
About 30 years.
Oh my gosh. So
I taught a total of 36 years. And then I decided I'd have as much fun as any person should have, and I resigned.
And was that a combination of theater and English, or was it?
Actually, yeah. And at East High School, I was usually an assistant coach for speech and an assistant director for drama. But I didn't take on, I taught a couple drama classes, but generally speaking, I ended up toward the end just teaching Brit Lit and American Lit, junior and senior English. That's what I did at the end, the bulk of. So.
Wow. So did you keep writing during all that time? Were you dabbling in fiction?
Yeah, I was. Fairly soon after I started at East, our department had said, we're getting in a lot of, Radio Shack. We called them Trash 80s. I don't know what the real name is anymore.
Oh gosh, yes. I used to be a reporter. And we used to use the Trash 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he got 4 of them, put them in a room, and he said, just come in and kind of doodle around with it. So I started writing this book. And if I ran into a tech problem, he was right there. And I go, well, how do I blah, blah. And it really was easy. So then I told Raj about the Trash 80. So he bought me one. And we set up an office in my basement in an old storage room. And I had my Trash 80 and I was good to go. And then later we finished off the basement. And I got an actual office with a file cabinet, bookcases. I was so thrilled.
Yeah. So what were you working on then? Did you have an idea for a mystery type of book, or?
Yeah, well, I had written some romances, and my daughter said, Mom, you need to unearth those. I said, oh, heck no. There's nobody I wouldn't inflict that on anybody. She said, but they're already written. I said, it would take so many hours of editing. I said, you know how you make pancakes and the first couple are kind of wonky? You throw them out or you give them to the dog, but you don't serve them. That's kind of like those first books were. So yeah, this was my first attempt at a mystery story. And I worked at it while I taught whenever I could. And Stacy was so young, she would sit in the keyhole and I would pass her papers, blank paper, and she could color. She was happy as a clam. And now she's got 3 grown, well, not grown, but getting there, girls herself. Our oldest granddaughter just turned 15.
Wow.
So yeah, 15, 12, and 8 or 9. Excuse me. 9.
Yeah.
They gotta stop doing those birthdays. I keep forgetting.
Yeah. Well, so was there one sort of writer who you looked up to as a mystery writer in terms of inspiration, or that you took your cue from?
Yeah, once I started trying to write a mystery, I started to try and read some, and Diana Mott I read a lot of, and because she was local area, and I'm trying to think. A lot of J.D. Robb. I wanted mine to be not as gritty as hers, but with that kind of character pool that she managed to create in the first couple ones. And so I liked that. And I tried to read some C.J. Box, who was also from Cheyenne.
Sure.
And he's a really neat guy. He wrote one of my blurbs for me. And
Nice.
he's a little more gritty than I am too. But when I went to Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers, one conference, I can't remember what it was, and we were talking about scenes that stay in your mind forever after you read it. And we all agreed it was Chuck Box's blowing up the cow episode, where the eco soldiers had planted some kind of dynamite bomb, blew the cow up. Went, oh God, can't get that out of your head. But yeah, those were, and I was inspired by a lot of people I met at Rocky Mountain. I try to go every year. I don't think I've missed a year since they first met at the Oxford, if you can believe that. The Oxford Hotel.
Wow.
We couldn't even get
Wow.
a good party on there. We would
Wow.
be packed like sardines. But
Well,
yeah,
and
way
this
back
is,
then.
well, before we get into Rough Ride, let's talk about that, because this is the 40th anniversary of Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers this year.
Mhm.
And we'd love to get a little reminiscence from you from the Oxford, if you could remember anything about that, just to add to the memories.
Well, we had one published author, and God forgive me, I can't remember her name, but she wrote romance. And since I had already tried my hand at that, I was interested to hear what she had to say about the genre. But basically, there weren't too many of us. And so we kind of coalesced in the lobby area, and then we'd break out into small meeting rooms for the workshop. Basically what we do now, but on a much smaller scale. And so there might be like 6 people in your workshop, and you're like up close and personal to whoever's the instructor. And it was perfect for me, because I knew from nothing. And you know, I wrote those romance novels, but I can't say I wrote them well. I mean, I probably would cringe if I had to look at them, but they encourage people to go out and write anything. So that's, you know, somewhere along the line, I decided, okay, I'm going to stop doing romance, because I'm not sure I have a gift for it. So basically what I have is a hybrid. There's some romance in it, but there's also mystery and suspense. So that's where I landed, basically.
Yeah. Mystery, romance, a little suspense, but no exploding cows.
No exploding cows, no.
Okay, good. All right, got that
but
clear. But
I have to say that they were very inclusive. I mean, one of the things that I remember about all of those early meetings, and even after they changed to a much larger venue and there are a lot more people, everyone was always very inclusive and very helpful. And I really appreciated that, because, you know, when you first start out, you don't really know what you're doing, and you hate to let everybody know you don't know what you're doing. They were so good about every session. They'd ask, you know, if anybody had questions, and even if you felt like your question was stupid, they treat it seriously. I learned a lot. Still do.
Yeah.
Will do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wow. Well, let's get into Rough Ride a little bit. Tell us about, sort of just give us the overview and tell us about your main character, Darcy Moreland.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Good for
Tell us
you.
about her.
Okay, Darcy Moreland. I have a friend who said, Paula, you're Abby and Stacy's Darcy. And I said, kind of. I kind of modeled Darcy after my daughter. And I'm not totally Abby either, so I'm a little of both. Anyway, so my main character is Darcy Moreland, and she was born and raised here in Cheyenne. And then she went to college at University of Wyoming, and then got on a small station in Kansas. And then had some problems back there and decided she wanted to move back. And she contacted the local TV station, and lo and behold, one of her college buddies was running it. And he said, you want to come back and cover Cheyenne Days for me? Because I know you know all about it. Her dad was a chairman, borrowing from real life. And so she came back to ostensibly cover all of the amazing, pockets of Frontier Days. And I tried to touch on some that people might not necessarily know about. They're not just right out there, but basically she goes up and meets her videographer, who is in all the other two books. And they start a working relationship, and he's going to lie down on the midway and shoot up at the Ferris wheel. And he's shooting it up, and this body drops from the top of the Ferris wheel and lands on the asphalt. And at first, Darcy thought it was a small child, and then looked at it closer, and she was a teenager, but she was very dead. And nobody knew whether she was alone on the Ferris wheel, if she jumped, or if she was pushed. And it turned out that Darcy knew this little gal because she babysat her. Her dad was a vet for Cheyenne Days. He's a big animal vet, and she knew her, and so she became galvanized by God. She was going to find out who did this, and if it was an accident or if it was murder. So
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So one thing about journalists as main characters, and I love that kind of, there's a subgenre of mysteries with journalists, television, or print reporters as mystery. You need to sort of spring them into that mode of getting out of being a reporter and being the person that goes to solve the case. Especially when you have police and other people around who are also theoretically going to care about prosecuting the murder if it was a murder. So
and they don't want you ruining their case. Absolutely.
Yeah. How did you handle that?
Well, basically the romance part is a Cheyenne detective who meets her basically at the scene of the crime, and doesn't really get testy with her until she just keeps showing up and asking people questions. And then he gets just annoyed at her, and she basically doesn't care because she wants to get the story, and she wants to figure out who killed Bridget, if it was murder or not. So basically that's the intersection. She and Hank have a relationship through all three books. And I can't say he learned to live with her jumping into the cases he was investigating, but it's a fun competition. So that's how I made it jump. When I was growing up, my mom was a political columnist for the local paper, and so she'd cover the legislature, and so at home you never knew, the phone would ring and you never knew who you were going to be getting, like the governor or the senator even, and you learn to answer it and say, yes sir, will you hold a moment, and it was really weird.
Yeah.
but she was a journalist, and so I have always admired journalists. I think they're a special breed of people. I really do.
Well, I spent 20 years as one, so thank you.
Oh, bless your heart. Yeah. What was your favorite thing?
Oh boy, I had a lucky career. Almost every stop I enjoyed immensely. I was a print reporter in Boston, Los Angeles, Denver. Wow. I worked for public broadcasting for the PBS NewsHour for 6 years, producing documentaries all over the country. Wow. Back in the 1980s. Yeah, I really had a great.
Dang, how are you possible? That's amazing.
So you mentioned 3 books.
Yes.
What's the status of the other 2 then? because only one is
Okay.
out, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
When I queried this publisher, I told them that I had this one, and the drill. Send me 50 pages, and then send me the full. And then she said, "You mentioned you had two others. Are they written?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Can I see a synopsis of both?" I said, "Sure." So I sent him the synopsis, and she said, "We'd like to offer you a 3-book contract."
Wow.
About Yeah,
Yeah.
I was pretty impressed. So the status of them is the second one has already gone through the concept edit, the line edit, the format edit. We got the cover done, and it's just sitting there waiting to go out and attack the world. It's not a Frontier Days, but it is set in Cheyenne, and it's about two bodies buried in a crawl space under an old home. So basically, they were buried 60 years apart. And that's when I got really lucky, because I'd gone to some forensic workshop at Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers and met this guy who was a mystery writer, but he was also a forensic scientist. And then he wrote a book about it, Something for Dummies. Anyway, he said, "Call me if you ever have any questions, just, I'd be happy to answer you." So I wrote him and I said, "Okay, how could you distinguish between two bodies buried 60 years apart?" And he said, "Well, if the older body was killed or died before the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and they started doing all those bomb tests in Vegas, he wouldn't have any radiation in him at all, in his bones. But we all carry a little bit of radiation."
Wow.
And I
Nice.
said, "You could have gone all day and not told me that," but it helped me with the
Yeah.
novel. So
I
that's
hope
the
you just
second
didn't,
one. It's called Brittle
hope you didn't get
Bones.
say the title again.
Brittle Bones.
Brittle Bones.
Yeah.
I hope you didn't give away too much of the solution there.
No. But
Okay.
I just, that's what fascinates me about this, is if you're writing a mystery, there are all kinds of holes in your own memory. So you need to go
Yeah.
find people and ask them, like I've got some guys standing by to ask about some things in the third one. I'm doing an edit on the third one, and I'll probably get that to my publisher. I'm going to say like a month or
Okay.
less.
So
Just because I have
who
to
is
check.
your?
Oh.
No, go finish your thought there.
I was going to say that basically the way it goes is I'll send her my first edition, and she will send me back anything she wants me to change conceptually, and then Melissa will do a line edit, and we go down the road merrily. My second one's going to drop on June 14th.
Great. Yeah.
So basically you have a year between each book.
Nice.
Because a lot of people who read my first book said, when's the second coming out? And I said, I don't know. So I finally asked her. She said, June 14th. So that's fun. And the third one is about a buffalo head that's blocking the front doors of an empty furniture store downtown. Not buffalo, bison. I always get those confused. We have bison in Wyoming, not buffalo. So this bison head is just sort of hanging out. And basically Darcy has to run an investigation about who bought the building. And there's some guy who's ramrodding it out. And it has to do with Indian rights, Native American property rights. And so I try to put in I try and keep my little pocket of characters, but then I try and bring in a whole lot of other kind of interesting people. So
Yeah.
that's my third one I'm editing right now.
That's great. And that one has a working title?
Yeah, that's Lucky Lady.
Lucky Lady.
I love alliteration.
Yeah. So let's name your publisher, and how did you find the publisher?
Well, my publisher is Epicenter Press, and it's out of Washington State. And one of their imprints is called Camel Press, and they do all the genre. They have other imprints that do like nonfiction and biographies, but this is the genre, the coffee press, which is under the auspices of Epicenter. And I had gone to one of my critique group meetings, and this gal who was not, I know her, but she was kind of new to our critique group. She said, Paula, you ought to query this place. They're looking for stories in contemporary West. And, all of yours seems to be that. And I said, yeah. So she had queried him first, and she got a contract, a 3-book contract as well. And so I, like I said, I went through that tap dance that everybody has to go through.
Yeah.
But they've been really good. I keep having to remind them that this is my first rodeo. I don't necessarily know what the hell's going on. I would love to think I did, but I don't. And so they've been very patient with me, which is nice.
Well, how did it feel when it finally came out last May, the first book?
This had been a dream for, I don't know how many decades. And we had a launch party at Frontier Days Event Center. So you look clear out on the arena. It was not in the summer, but that was in June, and the rodeo is in July. So I was just gobsmacked. I kept looking at the contract, and I kept saying, Roger, in a minute, I'm going to wake up. Somebody's going to say, ha ha, that was fun. Pulled your chain. And he said, no, I think it's legit. So, and I showed it to a friend of mine who actually used to be an agent. And he said, I can look at it and tell you my opinion, but he said, I've been out of agenting for a while. And I said, well, you've got more on me than I do. And so he read through it, and he said, it's a really good contract. I said, bonus.
That's great.
Yeah, they've been a really good group to me.
Yeah.
So
when you look back now, when you started to write Rough Ride, and now that you've almost completed book 2 and you're working on book 3, if you look back to the beginning of all that, what's the number one thing you've learned about putting words together and telling stories, that something now that you wish you'd known a few years ago before you started writing Rough Ride?
Yeah. Basically, I'm a pantser, which drives people who outline just crazy. And so I learned, I would go to my critique group and I'd take a chapter at a time. We each, did a chapter, and then we'd do the oral and from the things we got at the last meeting. And I was always amazed because we had such a diverse group. We had like a defense attorney and a PhD in education, I guess, and an ex-teacher, a former teacher, as well as myself, and some guy who was just out of the Army, and he had a nice young family. I mean, we had a nice group, and it always amazed me that they hit those chapters and different things would appeal to others. And sometimes they said, no, you got to take that out. That's not good. And 9 times out of 10, they were right. It was one of those, by the time you got a consensus, you took your chapter home and did the rewrites before you forgot. And they were dead on, and they were very kind. So nobody attacked me, which I thought was really sweet. The one district attorney guy worked in the district attorney office and says, Paula, it's not set up like that. And I said, it's okay. It's fiction. It works in my head. It's just an office. It's okay. So yeah. So that's the thing I wish I had known was out there, that whole critique group. I'd started with one online with Laura De Silvero and a couple of others, and we did it all online back and forth, which was interesting, but it got to be kind of cumbersome. And so when I found out there was another group in Cheyenne, they make you submit some of your writing, which is fair,
right.
And then they said, we'd love to have you as part of the group. And I went, thank you. But the stuff I learned in not just my writing, but other people's writings. And sometimes I would have to say, remember, I'm not your target audience. So I'm just going to give you what I think is good and bad. But I have to keep reminding them because they all wrote such different things, but
yeah, sure.
It all comes back down to tell us a story kind of.
Right. Feedback and taking in feedback, learning to take in feedback, learning that you still are the person in charge. You don't have to take every bit of feedback.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I took the majority of it, but yeah, every once in a while I go, no, I like this. Gonna keep it.
Yeah. Well, Paula, this has been a great introduction to your books, and wow, congratulations. Terrific.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was my little miracle. I mean,
Yeah.
I truly think God had me in the right place, the right time. I've been praying for decades, come on, just publish one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't expect a 3-book contract. So that was
That's
fun.
great.
Yeah.
Well, as we wrap up, we always like to give our guests a chance to kind of, sing the praises of one book or one writer in particular that you'd like to suggest more people pay attention to. So now's your
Well,
chance.
yeah, I'm a great fan of Nora Roberts, but I like the J.D. Robb books. They're a little bit more gritty than the romance, although I'll read almost anything she writes. I love the way she puts words together. But even my husband likes the J.D. Robb books, and we listen to books on tape as we're, when we drive down to Denver, see my daughter or whatever. And he likes them. But what I love about it is she starts with just this sort of no nonsense cop who lives in a really ratty apartment, and then she gets hooked up with a bajillionaire, and then she just keeps adding people to her tribe. And by the, I don't know how many of those dang things, 34 or something.
Yeah.
Something like that. Anyway, she managed to keep strings out, and she, like that Diana Gobladon, I can't ever say her name. Did with Outlander. And I love those. I love when you can have all of these characters and there were reoccurring characters, because then if they liked them in the first book, they want to see them in the second and third and see what happens as life goes on. And so that's fun, but the mysteries around them change. So.
Yep. Very good. Well, Paula, again, thank you so much for your time today. And we, of course, wish you all the luck with Rough Ride and all the future books. And maybe you'll get, this will lead to another 3-book deal.
From your mouth to God's ear. That'd be great. Thank you so much for having me. This is very lovely. You made it really easy. I appreciate that.